and insect permitting. Has anybody consulted the insects this week? And the ceremony will be held outdoors unless there is a need to use the sanctuary. If you have any questions, please contact, and I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind standing, Karen and Renee. Karen Nelson or Renee Peace. Their information will be published in an e-news that went out today or tomorrow. So if you want to know how to hook up with that, connect with me or talk to the person next to you and ask them if they know how. I'll bet they do. So welcome to First Parish Church Unitarian Universalist in Northborough, Massachusetts. Woohoo! We Unitarian Universalists are a non-creedal, religiously liberal faith tradition. We hold in our worship and in our faith formation that each individual and each community will explore a wide and varied set of beliefs and ideas and practices that encourage us to live life as a spiritual journey, deepening our connections to compassion, justice, and an understanding of eternal truths. I am Reverend Abigail Stockman. I am the interim minister here. And if you have any questions about Unitarian Universalism or First Parish Church that the person next to you cannot answer, please don't hesitate to be in touch with me. We are a community in multiple locations, so let's take a moment to greet one another by silently waving to those online and those around you until I ring the chime that calls us to worship.
I will try to play a portion of a piece I'm working on right now. It's American composer Margaret Bond's Troubled Water, based on the spiritual weight in water.
That should get your blood moving, which is perfect for our opening words, which come from Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. Active hope is not wishful thinking. Active hope is not waiting to be rescued by the Lone Ranger or by some savior. Active hope is waking up to the beauty of life on whose behalf we can act. We belong to this world. The web of life is calling us forth at this time. Active hope is a readiness to engage. Active hope is a readiness to discover the strengths in ourselves and in others, a readiness to discover the reasons for hope and the occasions for love. None of these can be discovered in an armchair or without risk. We gather in community this morning to encourage and inspire ourselves in this faith community to actively discover and practice our values based in the love which is known by many names, including the many names of God. Please rise in spirit, body as you are able, and let us welcome this new church year with number 361 in the gray hymnal, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Verses 1, 3, and 4.
May the light of practiced love become an eternal flame in our hearts, minds, and spirits. And now we have a story for all ages.
And a crisis of the glasses.
Yeah.
So please excuse us during the chalice lighting.
So you're gone. Okay. All right. Okay. So the title of today's story for all ages is Sophia's Guest. Once upon a time, there was a teacher named Sophia. Sophia had been a teacher in the town where she lived for so long that the kids she first had in her class grew up and had kids of their own and sent them to her class too. Nearly everyone in the town knew Sophia and loved her because not only was she an excellent teacher, she was also very kind. One day when Sophia got up to work, she found a note on her desk, and the note read,
Dear Sophia, I will be around tomorrow. I wonder if I might stop by your house for tea tomorrow afternoon. Your friend, God.
well, of course, at first Sophia thought it was a joke, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that if it was a joke, it really wasn't a very funny joke. And she couldn't think of anyone who would play a joke like that on her. Then she thought, what if it wasn't a joke? What if God really was going to come to her house tomorrow afternoon? Sophia thought she should get ready just in case. So on her way home from work, she stopped by the store and she bought one of those mats people put on their porch that says in big letters, "Welcome." When she got home, she cleaned her house from top to bottom. She brought in fresh flowers from the garden and put them in a vase in the living room. She cleaned and cleaned and cleaned until everything was sparkly. In the morning, Sophia realized she didn't know what God liked to eat. So she baked bread and made a casserole and maybe some fruit salad and baked some cookies too. And what about tea? Did God like hot tea, iced tea? Well, she better make both. And what if God's favorite thing in the whole world was lemonade? She thought she should make some of that too. She was just nervous. She didn't know what to expect. But just then there was a knock on the door. Sophia's heart went ba-boom, ba-boom, ba. She took a deep, big breath, opened the door slowly, and on the other side was the mayor of the town. Well, hello, Sophia. I was walking by and smelled the delicious fresh baked bread. Sophia said, I'm so glad you're here. Come on in. I'm expecting a very important visitor who you might just want to meet. Please come in and make yourself at home. Sophia and the mayor sat, having a nice discussion, when there was a knock at the door. Sophia's heart went ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. She took another deep breath, opened the door slowly, and on the other side was a group of children from her class. Hello, Miss Sophia. We were walking by and noticed that smell of fresh baked cookies. Sophia said, I'm glad you're here. Come on in. I was expecting a very important visitor you might want to meet. Come on, get some cookies. The children were giving the mayor some much needed advice when there was a knock on the door. Sophia's heart went ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Deep breath. Open the door. It was the entire women's covenant group from church. Hello, Sophia. We heard the tea kettle and laughter and thought, well, you're probably having a party in here. Sophia said, well, I am glad you're here. Come on in. I'm expecting a very important visitor who you all might want to meet. Please come in and make yourself at home. All afternoon, people stopped by Sophia's house, lured by those smells and the sounds, and town people filled her house upstairs and downstairs and overflowed into the backyard and the front yard. And as they got hungry, they made dinner together and ate as the sun set and the moon rose. It was a great party. People were playing games, telling stories, and baking and playing music and talking together. Sophia had such a nice time that she completely forgot about her very important guest. Even as she waved goodbye to her friends at the end of the night, she felt only contentment at having such a lovely party. In the morning, though, Sophia woke up and remembered everything. She was confused. Whatever happened to God? All during her walk to work, she tried to figure out what happened. Along the way, she smiled and waved to people she ran into who had been at her party. She thought to herself that she really should do that again. When Sophia arrived at work, she was surprised. There was another note on her desk. It read,
Dear Sophia, I had such a wonderful time yesterday. The bread was delicious. The cookies were divine. Tea mixed with lemonade is my favorite. Thank you for being such a wonderful host. I hope we can do it again soon. Love, God.
thank
A second reading this morning, considering the story, a reading from Annie Dillard. On the whole, I do not find Christians outside of the catacombs sufficiently sensible of conditions. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up batches of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It is madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares, and they should lash us to the pews. For the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return. Thus ends the reading. This is what you've been waiting for all summer. The sharing of personal joys and sorrows is a ritual of connection observed in many moments. There has been a lot shared this morning. So may we just breathe in and breathe slowly out together. And let us hold in a deep love beneath judgment or curiosity, the love that is just the care for another human being. May we hold all that we have heard. May the joys bubble up and out, and may the sorrows and concerns be held with strength and courage. Please remain seated as we sing together, Draw the Circle Wide. The words are draw the circle wide. Draw the circle, draw the circle wide. Draw the circle, draw the circle wide. Our financial offering each week is shared between the general operating fund of this church and a designated nonprofit organization. For the month of September, we traditionally use the half plate to replenish the minister's discretionary fund, that there will be funds available when members and community in need reach out to us during this coming year. And we are often reached out to. May we continue to be as generous as we are able. The offering for the work of this congregation will now be gratefully received and hope gratefully given. Let us join together in the spirit of prayer, that we may have time for our own spirits to rest, to grow, to deepen, to breathe. Spirit of life and love, we yearn to fill our hearts with more gratitude and more hope. And we yearn to lessen the energy we expend on envy, comparing, useless judgment, fear of outcomes over which we have little or no control. Spirit of life and love, we seek to learn to recognize and name our deeper needs, and to lovingly see the needs of others, so that we may fill our spirits, grow in trust, in love, in enacting justice, and in enabling the possibility of a more beloved community among us, within us, between us, and beyond us. We gather before one another, before what is eternal, holy, and sacred, for which we have many names and no names. We gather to slow down, to breathe deeply in and out, to reconnect to the spirit of life that runs within, among, between, and beyond. To slow down and notice what the poet calls our complex natures and beautiful faces, our own and our neighbors. May the elements of our being and of this place where we live, water, fire, air, and earth, be used to harness what is spirit building and creative within each of us and among us and between us and beyond us. May it be so. Amen. We have a music video.
There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more fires burning, they will find their way to me. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know.
Dum
Hey-oh, hey-oh, oh, hey-oh.
daya dum
Hey-oh, hey-oh, oh, hey.
daya dum
Hey-oh, hey-oh, oh, hey.
daya dum
Hey-oh, hey-oh, oh, hey.
daya dum
Mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know.
this I know.
There are more mountains falling, they will find their way to me. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will wade through the waters when they find their way to me. We will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. We will wade through the waters, this I know.
I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fire, this I know. I will walk through the fire when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fire, this I know.
I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know.
I will rebuild the mountains when they find their way to me.
I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know.
There's more water rising. This we know. More glaciers melting, heavier rainstorms causing inland and coastal flooding. There are more fires burning. This we know. We heard witness this morning to the fires in Maui. There's more drought in the world's hottest, driest places. There is more smoke obscuring the skies and the sun thousands of miles from the actual fires, or hundreds. There are more winds destroying in tornadoes and hurricanes and cyclones of new and vast proportions around the world. Just this past week, while the worship team and I were meeting, I in Vermont, a single strong gust of wind brought down 2 large trees on the street, one ancient by Vermont standards, weakened in their roots by the summer of floods and rain. And in that moment, the wind severed the communication of the worship team and I for the remainder of that day anyway. There are more winds. This we know. Just this week, there was another devastating 6.8 magnitude earthquake in Morocco. The earth is moving. This we know. These are no longer once-in-a-lifetime events. We know this too. We hear how 100-year flood zones flood over and over, year in and year out. Unheard of heat and unusual cold and winter storms. I tell you nothing you don't read in the news or see on your computer or hear on the car radio. This we know. Air can move us, and fire may transform us, and water shape us, and earth have the ability to heal us without great physical devastation and trauma, as our choir sang earlier. But sometimes the powers of the water and the fire and the air and the earth are to us humans devastating and destructive. More and more we see this other side of those powers. It makes us anxious. It should make us anxious. It creates anxiety among those of us who had and often continue to have enough comfort and trust in what seems to us timeless infrastructure to believe that we are, or we can ride this out, we're safe enough. And maybe, in some ways, we will be. We cannot, as humans, at least I can't, and I have a hard time imagining anyone else doing this, because I have a hard time imagining something, a concept like infinity. So we cannot carry in our heads a map of all the interconnections, all the webs that tie us, and the consequences of these events, one to another. One to another meaning to other human beings, to all living things, to the earth beneath and around us, the water and air, the planets, the sky, the atmosphere, the fire we need for warmth and sustenance that also lives within the earth, creating elements we use above ground. That's just a little bit of the web of connections. We are definitely an interconnected web in a web of all being. In some manner, every religious story or creation story talks about the interconnection of all being, even if humans practicing many of those religions have disconnected the interconnected web in practice and justified that through manipulating texts and doctrines over the last thousands of years. We're at a turning point in human history and human development, and it is in part, perhaps great part, pushed by the rising waters and the burning fires and the heated up and drying out cities and farmland and the earth moving. This we know. Whether or not our minds accept it, our bodies know it. It is in the beating of our hearts, in the rising of our blood pressures, in the abundance of food for us here in this Western world that fills us and expands us but does not truly nourish us. This we know, and somewhere within us this knowledge sits. Back in the 1980s, and I know there were many here who began on a similar journey of discovery, into a movement of unfolding theologies of that day, and much of my exploration, which was into feminist theologies, much of that feminist theology developed around mainstream religions in our culture. But there was another very strong theological development of those days around earth-centered religious traditions. These were primarily identified back then as either indigenous religious practices and wisdom, or around a redeveloping of ancient pre-Christian Western pagan religious practices and ideas. In a Western Celtic practice which I undertook back then, I began each day calling upon the four directions, the four elements of earth, air, wind, and fire. Each morning, I offered words of gratitude and praise for the day before me. Sometimes I even asked the power to protect or encourage me on that day, those powers. I was encouraged by readings from Starhawk and other well-known pagan practitioners. Their writings encouraged the recognition of one's own power and the urgency to use it serving the world. A primary tenet of the feminist pagan practices was that power is something all around and within us, something each of us can learn to develop and use. Activism was encouraged to assist in bringing our greater culture into alignment with the values espoused in earth-centered traditions. Values not unlike our Unitarian Universalist ones, quite aligned with them, one might say. Care for the interdependent web of all being, the inherent worth and dignity of all beings, political and leadership processes that were inclusive and encouraged power among rather than power over. Like many people, and certainly like many women of my age cohort, I've been well taught to limit my own power so as not to threaten others. And like many of you, I have been excellent student of that learning. I accompanied these morning practices of calling upon the power of the four directions, bringing a deeper hunger and curiosity to become more fully acquainted with the physical world in which we reside. My sacred scripture became the earth beneath my feet, the natural world around and above me, the planets and stars, and their light of ancient history only now becoming visible to eyes on earth. But what I was really curious about was power. What is it? How do we humans use it or misuse it? What is power? Only today do I look back on those days of invoking the powers of earth and air and fire and water to realize that, in the vein of Annie Dillard's words, just how blithely I invoked their power, and frankly invoked it for my own self-interest and spiritual growth. Self-interest, when it's spiritual growth, is a good thing, don't misunderstand me. But this summer in northern Vermont, I learned something new about the elemental power. Though I have lived through hurricanes and had trees fall just inches from my home, and I once drove across northern Idaho accompanied by the state police through a forest fire. This summer, I had a new lesson on the power of the elements. In just hours, the perfectly reasonable, workable, solid infrastructure of my rural town and the surrounding towns went from working well to being non-existent underwater. Our congregation in Montpelier, Vermont's 157-year-old building, situated on the banks of the North Branch River, was inundated by its rising waters. This morning, they meet in a temporary site while the cleanup of their building continues. It was the power of water and a storm to completely destroy within hours an infrastructure that we rely on, that really opened my heart and not just my eyes to a new aspect of power that invites me and all of us and you, each one of you, into a discovery about what is my power? What has it been? How have I used it or misused it? Because many of us sitting here identify and are identified as white in a culture where white has power, you don't even have to do anything. You just have to walk out the door and be among others. We have power. This congregation is full of people, and each of us has the ability to take our power and build it, practice using it in the service of love, intentionally, and to build that power up. Then we won't need a bell from the steeple that's a little bit uncertain in its stability at the moment. We will be the bell, ringing out the practice of love. Power has two sides, a creative and a destructive. We need to learn about the destructive because most of us don't want to see it. I don't want to know that I do that. I intend to be a good person. You intend to be good people. But we participate in things we did not necessarily create, but still receive the benefits of. But we also live at a time where we have the opportunity to change, to begin to engage in spiritual practices of love, which is not the liking, which is not about affection or feeling. It's about a principle and a value that the world deserves to be a place where everyone, even that person who drives me nuts, deserves to be loved, deserves to have a voice, deserves to be heard. And you have this incredible opportunity in front of you. And it's not to buy a bridge for $24, or was that an island for $24 in the middle of Hudson Harbor in New York. Your opportunity is much better. It's real. It's to grow your own heart, to become a living, active example of everything that you assent to here on a Sunday morning. Over this year, we're going to talk more about spiritual practices. One Sunday a month, the transition team will be leading worship, and they will be doing it in a bit of a small group manner as well as a corporate worship, and you will have some opportunities to deepen your practice of Unitarian Universalism. I invite you to open your hearts and your minds and your souls and your spirits and participate. Jump in with both feet. This is not a sport for sitting down. It will take risk. I know you're up to it. So you'll walk through the water, and you'll walk through the fire, and you'll rebuild the mountain. May it be so. Amen. Please rise in spirit, body as you are able or wish, and we will sing number 1046 in the turquoise hymnal, Shall We Gather at the River? may be seated, and I'm going to invite you, so that you're ready, to open up your gray hymnals to number 311. Is that accurate? Yes. And just so we're ready to start singing and moving, or I called it dancing because this is Let It Be a Dance, but movement, bringing our bodies into it is always good. This morning, in the past, you've been invited to bring waters from your summer to share and mingle them together as a blessing of the waters that have renewed us. In the service of the spiritual practice of love and support of our values that go along with that love, the values of interdependence, transformation, generosity, pluralism, justice, and equity. There'll be more about this later. You are invited today, if you are here, to take from First Parish Church Unitarian Universalist a small bottle of water, which we will soon pass out to you. For those of you who are joining us virtually, please gather at some point a small container of water from your blessed home. This water represents the love with a capital L that we are learning to practice within, among, between, and beyond. A learning practice encouraged and considered sacred and holy in this faith tradition. So let us literally spread it out into the world. For this love, when encouraged to grow and deepen, is too big, too transforming to keep only here in this sanctuary. Let us meditate for a moment on where you might pour out this water. I invite you to just breathe deeply and close your eyes and focus on a particular point if you don't want to close your eyes. And think about where you might want to pour out this water as a symbol of your commitment to a spiritual practice of love in this coming year. Take several deep cleansing breaths in, and most importantly, always out. Sometimes I have to form my lips and blow it out. This is not a question of who or what you will help. It is rather a question, to continue from Joanna Macy and Chris Johnson, a readiness to discover the size and strength of our hearts, our quickness of mind, our steadiness of purpose, our own authority, our love for life, the liveliness of our curiosity, the unsuspected deep well of patience and diligence, the keenness of our senses, and our capacity to lead, they wrote. Where would you like to focus your practice? Do you need to begin with loving yourself in a way that allows you to then love others in that manner? Or do you wish to pour it out on a piece of the earth, learning its history and advocating for its needs now and in the future if it is to survive? Or is there a person or persons or groups or identities or living beings you have found uncomfortable or difficult and want to relate to differently, to build a relationship, to make a connection? Is there something you've shied away from because of some identity you do or don't have? Seeking to learn more and willing to learn from about other people's needs and other beings' needs and the earth's needs. Take your water to that spot or some representative spot and pour it out. Symbolize your willingness to grow as best you can in this aspect of your faith. Name that person or persons or place to yourself right now. As our worship associates pass out the bottles of water, let us sing together the first verse of our postlude hymn, which is number 311, Let It Be a Dance. We may need to sing it more than once. And now we'll have our benediction, and then we can go back to singing as you depart. Be ours a religion, wrote Theodore Parker in the middle of the 19th century. He was a pastor and a scholar, and most of all, a social reformer. Be ours like a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. Let it be a dance. Go in peace, and we'll see you in a week.